The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Willow Creek when Dr. Samuel Hartwell first heard the thunder of hoofbeats approaching from the east. He paused in his examination of Mrs. Patterson's arthritic hands, cocking his head toward the window of his modest clinic. The sound grew louder, more deliberate than the usual cattle drives or merchant wagons that passed through their small Wyoming Territory settlement. "Doctor," Mrs. Patterson's voice carried a tremor of concern. At 63, she'd lived through enough frontier troubles to recognize the difference between friendly travelers and potential danger. Samuel moved to the window, pushing aside the faded calico curtains his late wife had sewn 3 years prior. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. A line of mounted Cheyenne warriors stretched across the horizon, perhaps 30 strong, their painted faces and feathered lances catching the morning light. At their head rode a man Samuel recognized from previous encounters during the uneasy peace negotiations, Chief Running Bear, a leader known for his tactical brilliance and unwavering protection of his people. "Mrs. Patterson, I believe our morning appointment may need to be postponed," Samuel said, his voice carefully controlled. "Please use the back door and head straight to the mercantile. Tell Jim Morrison to close up shop and gather the townspeople in the church basement." The elderly woman's face went pale, but she nodded with the stoic determination of a frontier survivor. "What about you, Doctor?" "I'll be along directly." Samuel helped her to her feet, already calculating the contents of his medical bag. "Go on now, and don't look back." As Mrs. Patterson hurried through the rear exit, Samuel watched the war party approach. They moved with purpose, not the scattered formation of a raiding party, but the disciplined advance of warriors on a specific mission. The lead riders carried no scalps on their belts, no fresh war paint that would indicate recent battle. Whatever brought them to Willow Creek, it wasn't random violence. The hoofbeats stopped directly outside his clinic. Samuel straightened his vest, ran a hand through his graying hair, and walked to the front door. He'd learned in his 15 years on the frontier that showing fear to any man, white, red, or otherwise, was a sure way to lose whatever advantage you might possess. He opened the door and stepped onto the covered porch, his hands visible and empty. Chief Running Bear sat astride a magnificent paint horse, his weathered face grave with concern. Behind him, the warriors maintained their mounts in perfect formation, their attention focused not on the town, but on their leader. Samuel noticed something else. Several of the warriors carried travel poles, and one of the makeshift stretchers bore a figure wrapped in buffalo hide. "Dr. Hartwell," Chief Running Bear spoke in clear English, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to command. "We require your assistance." Samuel nodded slowly. "I'm listening." "My daughter, Singing Bird, carries a child. The birth—" Running Bear's composed expression cracked slightly. "The birth is not progressing as it should. Our medicine woman has done what she can, but the child refuses to come. Singing Bird grows weak." The request struck Samuel like a physical blow. He'd delivered hundreds of babies in his medical career, but never under circumstances like these. The political implications alone were staggering. The territorial governor had been pressuring settlers to maintain distance from the local tribes, and any perceived collaboration could be viewed as treason by some. On the other hand, the Hippocratic oath he'd taken 25 years ago in Baltimore made no exceptions for race or politics. "Bring her inside," Samuel said without hesitation. "I'll need to examine her to determine the best course of action." Running Bear's eyes narrowed slightly. "My warriors will wait." "Of course." Samuel glanced at the 30 mounted men, their lances glinting in the sunlight. "Though I should mention that complex births can take considerable time, hours sometimes." "We will wait," Running Bear repeated, dismounting with fluid grace. He gestured to several warriors, who immediately began preparing to transfer the young woman from the travois to the clinic. As they carried Singing Bird inside, Samuel caught his first glimpse of the patient. She appeared to be in her early 20s, her face contorted with pain, but her eyes alert and intelligent. Her breathing was labored, and Samuel could see the telltale signs of a prolonged, difficult labor. The warriors placed her gently on the examination table, and Running Bear positioned himself near the window where he could observe both his daughter and his men outside. "How long has she been in labor?" Samuel asked, washing his hands in the basin while mentally inventorying his supplies. "Since yesterday's dawn," Running Bear replied. "The pain comes and goes, but the child will not descend." Samuel nodded, beginning his examination. Singing Bird's pulse was rapid but strong, and her temperature was elevated but not dangerously so. However, when he palpated her abdomen, he immediately understood the problem. The baby was in a breech position, and from what he could determine, likely quite large. In the frontier territories, such complications often proved fatal for both mother and child. "Chief Running Bear," Samuel said carefully, "this is indeed a difficult presentation. The baby is positioned incorrectly for a normal birth. I can attempt to turn the child, but it's a delicate procedure with significant risks." Running Bear's jaw tightened. "What are the risks?" "To your daughter, potential internal injury, excessive bleeding. To the child, the umbilical cord could become compressed, cutting off oxygen. Without intervention, however." Samuel didn't need to finish the sentence. "Do what you must," Running Bear said firmly. "Singing Bird is my only daughter, but she carries the future of our bloodline. Both must survive." Samuel began preparing his instruments, grateful for the advanced medical training he'd received before coming west. Outside, he could hear the occasional snort of horses and the low murmur of voices as the warriors settled in for what would clearly be an extended vigil. The situation was unprecedented in his experience. A white doctor treating a Cheyenne woman while her father's war party waited outside, ready to react to whatever outcome transpired. As he worked, Samuel found himself thinking about the delicate balance of relationships in the territory. The peace between the settlers and the local tribes had been fragile at best, maintained more by mutual necessity than genuine trust. Running Bear had clearly chosen to come to him as a last resort, placing enormous faith in Samuel's medical abilities while simultaneously presenting an implicit threat should anything go wrong. "Doctor," Singing Bird spoke for the first time, her voice weak but determined. "If you must choose between my life and my child's, save the child." Samuel looked up from his preparations, meeting her eyes. "Young lady, I intend to save both of you. That's not a choice I'm prepared to make." Running Bear stepped closer. "My daughter speaks wisdom. The child represents the future of our people. If sacrifice is necessary, no sacrifice will be necessary," Samuel interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of a man who delivered babies in conditions ranging from luxurious Baltimore townhouses to frontier hovels. "But I will need your daughter's complete cooperation, and I'll need you to trust my judgment completely. Can you do that?" Running Bear studied Samuel's face for a long moment, then nodded. "You have my word." Samuel began the delicate process of attempting to turn the baby, knowing that every moment brought them closer to either success or catastrophe. Outside, the warriors maintained their vigil, their presence a constant reminder that the consequences of failure extended far beyond the walls of his small clinic. The fate of more than just one woman and her child hung in the balance. The fragile peace between two peoples might well depend on the events of the next few hours. As another contraction gripped Singing Bird, Samuel realized that this day would either mark the greatest success of his medical career or herald the beginning of a conflict that could consume the entire territory. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders as he prepared to fight for 2 lives while 30 warriors waited outside his door. Part 2. 3 hours had passed since the Cheyenne war party had taken their positions around the clinic, and the tension in Willow Creek was palpable. Samuel could hear the nervous murmur of voices from the church basement where the townspeople had gathered, and occasionally caught glimpses of curious faces peering from behind curtains despite the danger. Sheriff Jake Morrison, Jim's younger brother, had appeared twice at the clinic's back door, each time offering assistance and each time being politely but firmly dismissed by Samuel. "Doc, you can't keep this up indefinitely," Jake had whispered during his second visit. "Some of the boys are getting restless, talking about forming up a posse. They figure 30-to-1 odds ain't too bad if we get the jump on them." "Sheriff, I strongly advise against any aggressive action," Samuel had replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Chief Running Bear is here seeking medical help for his daughter, not looking for a fight. Any hostile move on our part could turn this into a massacre." Now, as the afternoon sun beat down on the clinic's tin roof, Samuel found himself making gradual progress with the breech presentation. He'd managed to turn the baby partially, but the process was exhausting for both him and Singing Bird. The young woman had shown remarkable fortitude, following his instructions precisely, despite the obvious pain. "The child is stubborn, like his grandfather," Running Bear observed, attempting to lighten the mood. Samuel had noticed the chief's increasing anxiety as the hours wore on, though he maintained his stoic demeanor. "Most babies are," Samuel replied, adjusting his position. "Your daughter is doing exceptionally well. The baby's heartbeat remains strong, which is encouraging." Outside, the sound of approaching hoofbeats caused Running Bear to tense visibly. Samuel glanced through the window to see a familiar figure riding down the main street. Captain William Brennan of the Territorial Militia, accompanied by a squad of 12 mounted soldiers. The captain's arrival changed the dynamics considerably, and not in a positive direction. "Chief Running Bear," Samuel said quietly, "I believe we may have a complication beyond the medical one." Running Bear moved to the window, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. "Captain Brennan seeks glory in conflict. He has never shown interest in peaceful solutions." Captain Brennan dismounted with military precision, his brass buttons gleaming in the afternoon sun. Samuel had dealt with the man before and found him to be competent but inflexible, the sort of officer who viewed every situation through the lens of military strategy rather than human complexity. "Doc Hartwell," Brennan's voice carried clearly through the clinic walls, "I'm ordering you to evacuate the premises immediately. We have reports of a hostile war party threatening the settlement." Samuel exchanged glances with Running Bear, who shook his head slightly. "Captain Brennan," Samuel called back, "there's no hostility here. I'm providing medical assistance to a patient in critical condition." "Doctor, you're fraternizing with enemy combatants. I'm ordering you to leave that building immediately, or I'll consider you a collaborator." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gunpowder charge. Samuel realized that Brennan's arrival had transformed a medical emergency into a potential military confrontation. The captain's rigid adherence to territorial policy left no room for the nuanced reality of the situation. "What are your intentions, Doctor?" Running Bear asked quietly. "To deliver your daughter's baby safely," Samuel replied without hesitation. "Captain Brennan can wait, just like everyone else." Running Bear studied Samuel's face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You risk much for people who are not your own." "A doctor's oath recognizes no tribal boundaries," Samuel said, returning his attention to Singing Bird. "Besides, I've delivered babies for half the families in this territory. I'm not about to be intimidated by a pompous cavalry officer." As if summoned by Samuel's words, Captain Brennan appeared at the clinic's front door, his hand resting on his saber hilt. "Dr. Hartwell, I'm placing you under arrest for collaboration with hostile forces." "Captain," Samuel said, not looking up from his patient, "unless you've suddenly acquired medical training, I suggest you remain outside. This woman is in active labor, and any disturbance could prove fatal to both mother and child." Brennan's face reddened. "I have my orders, Doctor. The territorial governor has been explicit about fraternization with the local tribes. The territorial governor has never taken a medical oath. I have. This woman could die without proper medical care, and I'll be damned if I'll let politics interfere with my professional responsibilities." Running Bear stepped forward, his presence filling the room with barely contained power. "Captain Brennan, my warriors have instructions to remain peaceful unless threatened. However, if you interfere with the doctor's work, you will be responsible for the consequences." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Samuel could feel the weight of opposing forces balanced on a knife's edge, with his patient's life hanging in the balance. Singing Bird chose that moment to cry out as another powerful contraction gripped her, and Samuel saw his opportunity. "Captain, I need to focus entirely on this delivery. The baby is in distress, and I may have only minutes to save both lives. Whatever political issues exist between your government and Chief Running Bear's people, they pale in comparison to the immediate medical emergency before us." Brennan hesitated, clearly torn between his orders and the reality of the situation. Samuel pressed his advantage. "Furthermore, Captain, if this young woman dies while you're preventing me from providing medical care, Chief Running Bear will hold you personally responsible. Are you prepared to explain to your superiors why your interference led to the death of his daughter and the breakdown of the peace treaty?" The captain's jaw worked silently as he calculated the political ramifications. Samuel could see the man's military mind weighing the relative risks of action versus inaction. Finally, Brennan stepped back. "You have 1 hour, Doctor. After that, I'm clearing this area by force if necessary." "I'll need however long it takes," Samuel replied, but Brennan was already striding back toward his soldiers. Running Bear watched the captain's departure, then turned back to Samuel. "He will not wait long. Military men like him see patience as weakness." "Then we'd better work quickly," Samuel said, noting that Singing Bird's contractions were becoming more frequent and intense. "I believe your grandchild is finally ready to make an appearance." Over the next 30 minutes, Samuel worked with focused intensity, guiding the baby through the difficult breech delivery. Running Bear assisted where he could, his powerful hands steady and gentle despite their more familiar acquaintance with weapons of war. Outside, the tension continued to build as Captain Brennan's soldiers took positions facing the Cheyenne warriors, creating a powder keg that could explode at the slightest provocation. "Doctor," Singing Bird gasped between contractions, "the child comes now." Samuel nodded, positioning himself carefully. "Chief Running Bear, I need you to support your daughter's shoulders. The next few minutes will determine everything." As the baby's legs appeared, Samuel worked quickly to prevent the umbilical cord from becoming compressed. The silence outside seemed to intensify, as if the entire settlement held its breath. Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the baby's torso emerged, followed by the shoulders, and finally the head. The newborn's first cry shattered the tension like a gunshot, and Samuel felt a wave of relief wash over him. The baby was breathing, moving, and, from his initial assessment, appeared healthy and strong. "You have a grandson," Samuel announced, cleaning the infant and wrapping him in a blanket. "A fine, healthy boy." Running Bear's stoic composure cracked, and Samuel saw tears in the chief's eyes as he looked at his daughter and her newborn son. "Singing Bird?" "She's tired, but strong," Samuel assured him. "The delivery was difficult, but both mother and child should recover completely." Outside, the baby's cries had apparently reached the ears of both the soldiers and the warriors, because Samuel could hear voices conferring on both sides. The sound of new life had shifted the entire dynamic of the confrontation, reminding everyone involved that they were witnessing something fundamental and universal rather than merely a political standoff. But Samuel knew the crisis was far from over. Captain Brennan would still demand action, and the warriors would still need to safely escort their chief's daughter and grandson back to their people. The successful delivery had solved the medical emergency, but the political and military complications remained as dangerous as ever. As if reading his thoughts, Running Bear spoke quietly. "The hard part may be just beginning, Doctor. Getting my daughter and grandson safely home will require wisdom as well as courage." Samuel nodded, already considering the challenges ahead. The baby's cry had announced not just the arrival of a new life, but the beginning of a delicate negotiation that would test everyone's commitment to peace over pride. Part 3. The baby's continued cries seemed to echo through the streets of Willow Creek, carrying a message that transcended the political tensions surrounding the clinic. Samuel carefully examined both mother and child, relieved to find that despite the difficult delivery, both were stable and healthy. Singing Bird held her son with the natural grace of new motherhood, while Running Bear stood nearby, his weathered face transformed by the wonder of becoming a grandfather. "He's perfect," Samuel said, completing his examination. "Strong lungs, good reflexes, and a healthy appetite. Your daughter will need rest and care, but she's through the worst of it." Running Bear nodded, his eyes never leaving the baby. "What do we call him in your language?" "A miracle," Samuel replied without hesitation, "though I suspect you'll choose a name that honors your own traditions." "Little Thunder," Running Bear said softly, "for the noise he makes and the storm he was born into." The moment of peaceful wonder was interrupted by Captain Brennan's voice from outside. "Dr. Hartwell, your hour is up. I'm ordering you to evacuate immediately." Samuel looked at Singing Bird, who was still weak from the delivery, then at the newborn who would need continued monitoring for the next several hours. "Chief Running Bear, your daughter shouldn't be moved for at least another day. The risk of complications remains high." "Captain Brennan will not wait," Running Bear observed. "His kind sees only military solutions to complex problems." Samuel made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. "Then we'll have to change his perspective." He walked to the front door and opened it, stepping onto the porch where both the soldiers and the warriors could see him. "Captain Brennan, Sheriff Morrison, gentlemen," Samuel addressed the crowd that had gathered, "I've successfully delivered a healthy baby boy. Both mother and child are doing well, but they require continued medical supervision. I'm requesting that everyone maintain their current positions while I complete my professional responsibilities." "Doctor," Captain Brennan replied, his voice tight with frustration, "I have specific orders regarding interaction with hostile forces. This situation has gone on long enough." "Captain," Samuel said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd spent years making life and death decisions, "this is no longer a medical situation. It's a medical one. That woman and her baby are my patients, and I won't abandon them to satisfy bureaucratic concerns." Sheriff Morrison stepped forward, his face thoughtful. "Doc, what exactly are you proposing?" Samuel had been thinking about this moment for the past hour, weighing the risks and possibilities. "I'm proposing that we demonstrate something remarkable here today. Chief Running Bear came to me seeking medical help for his daughter. I provided that help, and now we have a healthy mother and baby. Rather than letting this turn into a confrontation, why don't we use it as an opportunity to show that our peoples can work together when human life is at stake?" "The territorial governor," Captain Brennan replied. "The territorial governor wasn't here when that young woman was fighting for her life," Samuel interrupted. "The territorial governor didn't deliver that baby. And the territorial governor doesn't have to live with the consequences if we turn this into a bloodbath." Running Bear appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately commanding attention from both sides. "Captain Brennan, you are a soldier, and I respect that. But today, this white medicine man fought to save my daughter's life as fiercely as any warrior fights to protect his people. He asked nothing in return, showed no fear, and honored the sacred duty of preserving life." The chief's words carried weight that surprised Samuel. Several of the townspeople had emerged from their hiding places and were listening intently to the exchange. "My warriors and I will leave peacefully," Running Bear continued. "But we will not forget this day. Dr. Hartwell has earned the protection of the Cheyenne people. Any who threaten him, threaten us." Captain Brennan looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Chief Running Bear, I appreciate your gratitude to Dr. Hartwell, but I still have my orders." "Captain," Sheriff Morrison interjected, "what exactly would you be arresting the doctor for? Saving lives? Practicing medicine? The territorial governor may have his policies, but last I checked, being a doctor wasn't a crime." Samuel seized the moment. "Captain, I propose a compromise. Allow me to complete my medical care of the patients, another 24 hours at most, and then Chief Running Bear and his people can depart peacefully. No conflict, no casualties, and no political complications for your superiors." The standoff stretched taut as both sides considered the proposal. Samuel could see the calculation in Captain Brennan's eyes as he weighed his orders against the practical reality of the situation. A military confrontation would likely result in casualties on both sides, and explaining why he'd attacked a medical facility would be politically awkward. 12 hours, Brennan said finally. "After that, I expect all parties to disperse peacefully." Running Bear nodded. "Agreed. My warriors will maintain their positions to ensure my daughter's safety, but we seek no conflict." As the immediate crisis passed, Samuel returned to his patients, amazed by the transformation that had taken place. What had begun as a potential disaster had become something resembling a diplomatic breakthrough. The townspeople began to disperse, though many lingered to catch glimpses of the baby, who had inadvertently become a symbol of hope. Over the following hours, Samuel was surprised by the number of visitors who came to the clinic. Mrs. Patterson returned with a basket of food for Singing Bird. Jim Morrison brought coffee and blankets for the warriors maintaining their vigil. Even some of Captain Brennan's soldiers expressed curiosity about the baby, though they maintained their official distance. As evening approached, Samuel found himself sitting on the porch with Running Bear, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The baby had settled into a peaceful sleep, and Singing Bird was resting comfortably. "This day has been unlike any other in my experience," Samuel admitted. "I've delivered hundreds of babies, but never under circumstances like these." Running Bear nodded. "My people have a saying, 'The arrival of a child changes everything.' Today, Little Thunder changed more than just our family." "Perhaps," Samuel said, "though I suspect the politicians will find ways to complicate things again soon enough." "Politicians always do," Running Bear agreed. "But today, we showed that ordinary people can choose understanding over conflict. That matters more than any treaty written on paper." The next morning brought a peaceful resolution to the crisis. Captain Brennan, faced with orders from his superiors to avoid any actions that might destabilize the region, agreed to escort the Cheyenne party safely to the territorial boundary. Singing Bird, though still weak, was strong enough to travel with proper care. As the warriors prepared to depart, Running Bear approached Samuel one final time. "Dr. Hartwell, my people will remember this day. If you ever need our help, you have only to ask." Samuel nodded, understanding the weight of the offer. "Take care of that grandson of yours. He's got a strong spirit. He'll need it in the years ahead." The departure was remarkably peaceful, with townspeople gathering to watch the procession rather than hiding in fear. Several women waved goodbye to Singing Bird, and a few men nodded respectfully to Running Bear. The baby's cries had broken down barriers that years of political negotiation had failed to breach. That evening, as Samuel cleaned his clinic and restored order to his medical supplies, he reflected on the extraordinary events of the past 2 days. A simple medical emergency had become a test of character, courage, and humanity. The successful delivery of Little Thunder had not only saved 2 lives, but had also demonstrated that understanding and cooperation were possible even in the most unlikely circumstances. Sheriff Morrison stopped by as Samuel was finishing his work. "Doc, that was something else. I've never seen anything quite like it." "Just doing my job, Sheriff," Samuel replied, "though I'll admit it was more complicated than usual." "The territorial governor's gonna hear about this," Morrison warned. "Some folks won't be happy about the precedent it sets." Samuel shrugged. "Let them complain. I took an oath to preserve life, and that's exactly what I did. If that makes me a controversial figure, so be it." As the sun set over Willow Creek, Samuel realized that the events of the past 2 days had changed him as much as they had changed the relationships between the various groups in the territory. He had faced down military authority, political pressure, and social expectations to honor his commitment to his patients. In doing so, he had discovered reserves of courage and conviction he hadn't known he possessed. The story of Little Thunder's birth would be told for generations, becoming part of the folklore of the American West. But for Samuel Hartwell, it would always be remembered as the day he chose medicine over politics, humanity over prejudice, and life over the easier path of indifference. The baby's cries had indeed announced the arrival of a new life, but they had also heralded the possibility of a new understanding between peoples who had too often seen each other as enemies. In the harsh landscape of the frontier, where survival often depended on strength and suspicion, a moment of trust and cooperation had created something beautiful and lasting. As Samuel locked his clinic and headed home, he could still hear the echo of Little Thunder's first cry, a sound that had changed everything and everyone who heard it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patients, and new opportunities to honor the oath he had taken so many years ago. But tonight, he could rest in the knowledge that he had helped bring new life into the world and, in doing so, had helped plant the seeds of a more hopeful future.